On this week's Bet the Process podcast, we have Bud Elliott to talk all things college football bowl and playoff scenarios, opt out scenarios, NIL, the whole deal. This episode is sponsored by Splash Sports. We'll be running two contests with Splash for the college football season, $100 college football bowl and playoff pick'em, and $100 college football playoff survivor. While you're there, check out their brand new Quick Picks games. Quick Picks is a brand new peer-to-peer DFS game. It's live on Splash Sports. In this format, you'll select more or less on at least two different player projections, winning up to 25 times your money. Be on the lookout for more contests on Splash soon with the NFL playoffs, PGA, and March Madness on the horizon. You can go check it all out at splashsports.com/BTP. And so with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast, a very special episode because we do not have Rufus. Instead, we have Bud Elliott, which seems like a major upgrade to me. It's kind of like going from coach in Frontier to first class in Emirates. That's a major upgrade. That's kind of like what I see it as. Bud, thanks for joining us.
Dude, absolutely, man. Glad to be back.
So first question I have for you is how do you think the committee did? Do you agree with the decisions they made? Obviously, after last year, where they made some challenging decisions, they seem to go a different direction this year. Do you think that influenced the way that they did things this year, and generally, how do you feel about it?
I have largely thought that like on a week-to-week basis, the committee doesn't really follow its own, if you want to use the word precedents, but obviously I don't think that they actually set precedents, because if it's a precedent, you're supposed to follow it, right? But I don't think that they're always consistent week to week with what the committee chair cites, or perhaps what the committee is caring about. There are some kind of themes that maybe develop from each committee each year. You can kind of get somewhat of a feel, for maybe what they value. Some committees might value, consistency. Some might value like the ability to play up and to beat a playoff team. And some, might just like they penalize you more for losses, and they're kind of going to do like a, with some modifications, almost like an ordinal rank, based on the number of losses. But the one overriding factor I think you see with every committee, they're gonna do what they feel they can get away with. And I'm not trying to say like conspiracy wise, but like they're gonna basically, like, there are some constraints that are put on it. When SMU came back to tie Clemson and actually make that a game, I think if you're Alabama, you had to know you were kind of cooked. Like that was a real close game. So you have what, two losses for SMU, one over a playoff team, and one over what, a 10-2 BYU team, I think, or 9-3 if I recall, but a BYU team that was very much active in the Big 12 race, up until the end. No blowout losses for you. A couple nice wins. Louisville, they beat Louisville in their own house, and Louisville played Notre Dame, pretty close up until the end in South Bend. So I just don't think that it was. I don't think they could have really gotten away with it, so to speak, by putting in Alabama over SMU. Like, would I power rate Bama over SMU? Yeah, I would. But I think
But
the
you'd power rank
margins.
Ole Miss over SMU, right?
I
You'd
would,
power rank
yeah.
South Carolina over SMU, probably.
I think so, yeah. Especially with Sellers healthy. But also, I think the margins between these teams are much smaller than ever before. Whether you want to use Sagarin or FPI or SP Plus, or whatever kind of publicly available predictive metric there is, 14 teams over the last 5 years are rated higher than any team this year.
Wow.
Like, we've got a bunch of like 4 and 5 seed type teams this year. I don't think you put any of these teams in prior playoffs that they would have a real good chance of winning it all. And so the compression in the sport due to all the player movement, I think, is real.
So let's talk a little bit about player movement then. What do you see happening in this bowl season? Last year was the first one that we really had in both the kind of NIL / real portal, and it was a mess, right? Like, it made me at the end of the bowl season say, like, why are we even doing? Well, it made me more say, why am I even betting on these things? But really,
Right.
like, why? And then the the actual progression of that thinking is, if I'm not going to bet on these, why are we bothering even playing these things, right? So, how do you see that playing out this year? Do you think it's? I mean, I imagine it's gonna be worse than it was last year.
I think it could be worse. Maybe the one benefit is are you starting to get a feel, for which coaching staffs are going to allow players who are in the portal to play, and which which staffs might not do that. And but again, like that's I think different on a player to player basis every year. And you might have had a situation where last year a coach lets a player who's in the portal play, but then this year's like, I kind of regret that. And then like so you're banking on 1 year of sample set, and then maybe that coach is like, not this year. You have situations where guys are practicing, but it's very anticipated they might hit the portal. Like look at John Mateer, from Washington State. Like if he doesn't play, that's a huge deal. He'd be one of the top quarterbacks in the portal market. But the reports are out there that he's planning to practice, with the team. You get the cryptic tweets from guys. I saw the Marshall DN, said that he'll be attending the bowl game. I was like, that's an interesting word choice there, attending the bowl game. Like not didn't say playing it, just said he'll be attending the bowl game. So look, you'll definitely get some CLV more often than not if you're ahead of these moves. But like so many of them moved back last year as well because like it's like, oh, actually I am playing, or oh hey, this team, like you had a good feel for the opt outs on the one team, but then the other team had a ton of opt outs as well, and it didn't end up being what you thought it was. Uh, but it's an opportunity. It's crazy. Um, it's
What are there any games that you're looking at right now that you see, interesting opportunities where maybe people are overvaluing players? Like last year we kind of talked about, we went through all the games, and one of the things we kind of talked about was the inability or the challenges that you have understanding the impact of players opting out based on who's next man up. And in some cases, like next man up, they were ready to have that next man up. So it's like almost like much ado about nothing. I assume that there are similar situations. You of all people are probably the best at knowing the second, third string tackles on these teams. So where are some areas that you're looking at right now? Any specific games?
so let's just go to the one coming up in shoot, what is that, like 3 days? I think it is the
December 14th. I love that the bowl season starts early this year. I love that is one of the best things they've done. And that honestly makes sense. It's like, why drag these things on if they're less, if they're less meaningful now, why drag them on? Although I guess the key would be a lot of these guys would like to get, 3 more weeks of practice too.
I agree with you on that. Also, if we're going to have the playoff drag so long into the off season, or well, not the off season, but like if we're going to have it drag so long and like compete against NFL, let's fill some of this TV time now because like the playoffs don't start for a minute. So we need some stuff to put on TV. We need some stuff to watch when certain people are, off work or what are they going to do? Spend time with their families. So, um, you know,
That we decided that's a negative EV move,
love
spending
it.
time with your families.
Oh my gosh. So like South Al opened what 10? It's down to 7 against Western Michigan. Now Fluff Bothwell, their running back, is in the portal. He's pretty good. Awesome name by the way, Fluff Bothwell.
That is the best.
But now it's like okay, that's not a 3-point move. Are they a team that like is Gio Lopez going to play the quarterback for South Al? He's a pretty good player, for them. There hasn't been any kind of announcement. He did deal with like some turf toe this year, I believe. So my guess is he's a guy who would be a portal candidate. Like he's not in the portal, but um, I'm curious to see kind of what happens there. Obviously, like that's a move, to look into. Memphis last year had some opt outs, right? And they ended up playing Iowa State and killing it. So like, maybe that's certain coaches do seem to care about bowl games more. Shane Beamer seems to get his guys up for bowl games a lot, and I think probably because his dad was a college coach, he just grew up like going to bowl games. He's able to kind of, I won't say trick the team into caring about bowl games, but that's the next one on the schedule there. I I don't think South Carolina is going to have a ton of opt-outs. Some of their better players are young guys. Obviously, they want to build on that momentum that they had from this season. I mean, they're 3 points, so South Carolina will come up later, but like I I think that's one to look at. Like certain coaches who tend to care about bowl games, like they talk about it and they're about it. And I don't know if you want to assign extra value to that, but certainly, uh, if one team really cares and one team doesn't, that can help a little bit, especially if it's not Big Ten.
So if you go back to, the idea of like South Carolina, right? They were a team that I think everyone said at the end of the year they were as hot as any team, right? And everyone, that was just sort of the narrative. Do you think that there is the disappointment of not making it, or do you think like they really never had a chance to make it? So like the idea that like they will finish strong because this is like they're kind of finishing that move, right? Are they? If you were to bet on one side or the other, which would you bet on? And again, you added in the Shane Beamer piece and blah blah blah. So that seems like an interesting angle.
I think so too. And then you got the playoff games, obviously. Like Tulane's quarterback, Mensa is pretty widely reported to be maybe interested in Duke, or Duke has interest in him. I mean, he's a pretty good player, and like maybe not a freak athlete, but really, really good player. They're playing Florida. Florida's a team that I would not expect to have a ton of opt-outs in the game. If Florida shows up and cares, I don't really think Tulane can play with them. 13 might be short, especially with how well Lagway has been playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about the Ole Miss loss to Florida was, well, it's sort of unforgivable given the talent mismatch at that point. It makes a little bit of sense in Florida in that moment with Lagway back, et cetera, right? I mean, like it's more excusable in my mind than Alabama losing by 21 to Oklahoma, which I just didn't fully understand why Alabama was still getting so much love over Ole Miss at that point. But this may be because I was holding a 35-1 Ole Miss ticket, so I might be kind of biased a little bit. But
I think it's probably because of who Ole Miss lost to and when. That Saturday they lost to Kentucky, like that was bad. Kentucky had just been blown out by South Carolina like the week before, and so it just looked bad, to lose to them. And I I think and also like the brand name is going to matter quite a bit. Like Alabama's Alabama and Ole Miss is Ole Miss, so I do think there's a bit of like kind of bias going on there. But Ole Miss, damn good football team, and Florida. I mean, you could say they're a little lucky in that game because Ole Miss did drop some interceptions that were or interceptable passes that were thrown. But Lagway's a good quarterback, man. Like we knew he was the number one rated player in the portal, or sorry, out of high school. But at the same time, I didn't know how good he would be this soon. And like for him to be this good this soon, like they're a team. If they really crush the portal this year, they could like win the whole damn thing next year because I think he is like that talent.
that is a bold statement, but very interesting. If you go
Especially with the
back,
compression in the sport, right? I
well,
mean,
that's the interesting thing about the compression in the sport, right? Because I would argue that if Ole Miss made this thing, they would be in my top probably 5 teams that I would pick to win the whole thing because of just they have a high upside and also a pretty low floor. It's so like it's the variance of being able to win a few games because that game they played against Georgia. I mean, I don't think I saw a better game played by a team, right? In the game against Florida, I feel like Kiffin just fell in love with that short yardage package. And rather than just letting Jackson Dart kind of like step back and pick out things and, try to get more explosives, he falls in love with this short yardage package, which just didn't work that day. And like they had 3 trips inside the red zone that they'd got no points from because of that.
totally. No, I think that's a good point. I wonder how much they trusted Dart this year because I don't think he took the step against the better teams that they wanted him to take. It seemed like it still had to be
I mean,
really
he played
schemed up
amazing
for him.
against Georgia.
That's fair. Yeah, that game was that was interesting. I know it was a weather game, but like he did play really well in that ball game. But I just felt like throughout the year, he just did he blow you away? Like, did he seem like, yeah, that's an NFL guy? You know, I
in that direction, meaning
Yeah.
I'm seeing now sevens. Is that injury information based on, or what it like? It sounds like you believe that may be injury related.
I think it's probably matchup actually, right? Ohio State's defense is still really good. Oh, you mean it's moving back to 8?
No, no, it's moving to 7.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay.
Yeah.
No, so uh, I think like specifically, where is Tennessee really good? Okay, they are really good on the defensive line. The offensive line is, I think, good enough to block Ohio State. Ohio State, especially with the one corner, seems to be a team you can isolate a little bit here. So Tennessee will definitely spread you out and do that. You know, Nico's ability to run the ball. Are these teams really that different with Ohio State's offensive line injuries? I don't know that they are. I mean, Ohio State has a better defense, but it's not like so much better. Tennessee has guys that are going to be drafted on the D line. So does Ohio State. Neither of them are amazing at corner. Neither of them are amazing at linebacker. Ohio State's way better at safety, I would say. So I don't think the gapping between those teams is maybe quite what it is. Ohio State has way better receivers though. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is crazy good. Egbuka as your number 2 or 1A for this year's college ball playoff is quite the luxury. I mean, obviously I understand why Ohio State's favored, but I don't really think this should be over a touchdown. I think Tennessee can play with them.
Is this the game where Nico shows the promise that everyone's been waiting for and completely outplays Will Howard, and this is his coming out party?
I think so. I mean, well, I think it could be certainly.
Right.
Like, do they need him to be? Like, how many points do you think you need to score here? What's the race to? I mean, the total's 47.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 20 something.
I
20.
think so. Yeah, like
Yeah.
if you gave Tennessee, 27 in this game, if you're playing deal or no deal, like that's deal and walk away, right? They would take
Yeah.
27 in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. 46.5 is what it's lined at. It's actually gone down to like +7 -108. So it's falling. How about Indiana? Indiana Notre Dame will be the first one that we kick off, I guess, not this Friday, but next Friday. We got Indiana's down to a 7.5 point underdog. Do they have a chance in this game? And like, how much do we really know about Notre Dame?
I think they have somewhat of a chance because Notre Dame is they're a really good team, but I don't think physically that they are quite as freaky as maybe some of the teams. Like, I don't think up front defensively that the Irish are quite like what Ohio State is or what Michigan is. And those are the two teams that gave Indiana's offense a lot of problems this year, just because it was almost like there's some kind of threshold that once they get above, Indiana's O line is probably going to struggle just based on talent. So I think Indiana does have a chance, but the Irish don't make a lot of mistakes. Neither of these teams do. Like they play pretty clean football. Leonard's played a lot better, down the stretch, and I think that's important to note, especially as a passer. Like he's gotten better. The one key thing is, like if I'm Indiana, I'm going to sell out pretty hard to win first downs. Notre Dame, even in their wins, has had some problems when they get behind the sticks. I don't think they're really made for that drop back stuff where play action's not a reasonable threat. I know people say like play action's effective every down. Okay, but like if you just got to drop back and throw it, they're not quite as good. In that game where Virginia backdoored them, and they were horrendous on like passing downs. And then they had a couple other games this year where they just seem to get really out of sorts when they're behind the sticks, which everybody's a little bit worse when they're behind the sticks, but they're meaningfully worse when they're behind the sticks. So we'll see like how well does Indiana sell out to kind of win those early downs defensively against the Irish. If you can do that, then okay. If not, like Irish have pretty good backs, and they may just out physical.
So I was not to name drop, but it wouldn't be about the process episode if I didn't name drop. But I was with a particularly good wide receiver that is also a good golfer that may have played at Pitt. And he was talking about his son and the recruiting and whatnot. And someone asked him about what he thought about Riley Leonard, and he just said he runs too much. Like he just runs too much. And so that kind of like if you get behind the sticks and you got a quarterback that's just trying to run, that's not a great recipe. I mean, are we? Do we believe that Signetti is the better coach here? The better game prep, the better like is that the advantage there?
I would say he certainly has proven that so far. Freeman. I liked what they did against Texas A&M, but then they go and they lay the egg against Northern Illinois literally the next week. So like, Indiana's consistency and I think the track record of Signetti on game day, yeah, you got to give him the edge.
All right. Penn
However, the
State.
coordinators
Good.
for Notre Dame are really good. Like I think Denbrock did a great job with Jade Daniels. Daniels was way better at the end of his LSU career, than he was for Arizona State. And like Al Golden had a weird experience at Miami, but the guy won at Temple with absolute nails defense. Everybody liked him in the NFL, and he's done a great job with Notre Dame's defense. So, coordinator wise, I think it's probably Edge Irish. Now, late game decisions, it's probably Signetti.
Yeah. Prep coordinators seem to matter a lot more for prep. So, SMU, Penn State. Penn State's 8.5, totals 54. Anything there? I mean, SMU probably feels pretty great to be in this thing, and Penn State probably feels a little disappointed to be playing SMU. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, obviously it's the playoffs, so you don't expect any real letdown.
I mean, how many quarterbacks would you take over Jennings in this game?
I mean,
The
he's
SMU
just
team.
like he's like a little like water bug. It's just like constantly like in those throws, he makes like a Mahomes cross body throw every other play.
Yeah, I was early on in the season. I was very anti SMU because they kept messing around with Preston Stone. Like we saw this last year. They didn't have Stone when they played Tulane in the conference championship game, and they're like, we're gonna be fine, because Jennings is pretty good. And then like for some reason they went back to Stone to start this year. I guess you don't lose your job to injury or something. But if they play Jennings the whole way against BYU, they probably win that game. Like they got down in the hole early and got negative game scripted against a team that was at the time pretty good at running the football in BYU. So um, yeah, I do think they're pretty good with Jennings. Not amazing. I understand why the line is what it is, but I mean, Penn State's secondary is a little bit leaky. Oregon exposed them out. Now SMU does not have Oregon's receiver, so Penn State, may be just fine here against this attack. I have liked what I've seen Penn State's offense against Oregon though. Like that, if I'm SMU, is a little bit concerning. SMU, my main thing why I liked Clemson last week was I just don't know how many, let's call them like legitimately decent to better offenses SMU had faced. Like their numbers were awesome this year, but there is kind of the whole like, covariant thing where you're really good against a certain caliber, but then some of the things you do may not translate against the better opponents. And I think we have a little bit of that going on with SMU. If you pull the schedule up, Jeff, it's so. Why is it okay? So Nevada, close game, whatever. Like that was an okay offense at the time. BYU, they held them to 18, lost the game. TCU put 42 on them, and that was a game SMU won crazy, but SMU had like plus 28 of turnover EPA in their favor. So, maybe weird. Florida State was a disaster there. Louisville put 27 on them, moved the ball extremely well. Stanford I think that was the game both quarterbacks were out for Stanford. Duke's offense this year was really not very good. They win that game 28-27 in overtime. Pitt was Holstein was hurt in that ball game, I believe. So another kind of backup quarterback faced. They faced Grayson James of Boston College. That wasn't an injury thing, but kind of was. And so another backup QB there. UVA again, a disaster of an offense. They faced Cal without Mendoza, so another backup quarterback faced.
and like a local kid that's always wanted and like putting up some pretty good numbers. Is there any reason to believe that Georgia can still win this national championship with a backup quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if so, is Georgia going to get Colby Young back at receiver? Because that's an underrated storyline. I mean, remember they lost Ra Thomas, who they booted for the domestic violence stuff, and then they lost Colby Young to kind of an indefinite thing for the some kind of I don't want to say and be wrong, but some kind of allegations, which I think have since been cleared up or whatever. But they're saying Colby Young could be back for the playoff. That's a big deal because Georgia right now they don't really have a go-to receiver, especially not at that X position. I mean, it's Arian Smith who like really can't catch. They like to throw him go balls, but when he has to run actual routes and catch balls in traffic, it's a disaster. And Dylan Bell, kind of the same thing. Like they have a lot of guys that you have to scheme it up for. They don't have a guy who can just go out there, run routes, and get open and throw the ball to. Colby Young is that nice red zone target. I mean, I thought it was telling when they faced Georgia Tech there in that 8 overtime game. They're throwing like jump balls to Arian Smith. Like, okay, that's like our gadget deep ball, play action hide 'em type guy, and that's who you're having to go to right now. It's the tight ends who, let's just say, aren't Brock Bowers level tight ends. But if you get Colby Young back, the run game looked pretty good against Texas. Etienne is a special back when he's actually healthy and playing. So I could see it. I mean, like this defense is still really good. I don't think there's anybody who do they run into they just can't play with.
I mean, Oregon would be the worry, and I've seen look ahead lines that say Notre Dame would be favored in Georgia would be favored in that bowl game. So do you think that's true, and how do those two teams match up?
I think Oregon should be favored just because their ability to score points.
Notre Dame.
Oh,
Notre Dame. The look ahead lines I've seen are Notre Dame -2.5 against Georgia.
Man, I think I'm grabbing the points with Georgia.
Yeah, and that's probably a reaction to Beck versus Stockton, right? I imagine.
But Beck hasn't played all that well this year.
I would argue. I basically said, can Georgia win? I don't think Georgia. I'm not sure if Georgia can win a national championship with Beck as quarterback because he makes too many mistakes, right? Like they are, and so. Obviously Stockton made a pretty big mistake at the end of that Texas game. But aside from that, the other thing is, am I wrong in thinking that they didn't run a lot of design runs for Beck, and they seem to have a few more that they, I saw a lot of those plays that Stetson Bennett used to run, those quarterback draws and things like that. Is that true? Because obviously Beck is athletic and can run. So
I don't think they wanted to run him though. With Stockton, they seem to care about running him some. Now maybe that's because the difference between his passing and his running is somewhat minimal, whereas Beck is clearly still a better passer than he is a runner. But I agree with you. I think in that game specifically, getting him on the move, running him around a little bit, maybe it helped his confidence. So I wonder, if you have to do that for 3 straight games, does that work? Or well, I guess not because they get the bye, but maybe that could work. I don't think Stockton is like the solution, but Georgia hasn't been super quarterback dependent.
Yeah, well, that's my hope. All right. Any last thoughts on the Bulls or the playoffs? Any tidbits that you want to share that you think our 7 listeners might be interested in?
I'm very interested in who's actually playing Boston College, Nebraska. Nebraska, they lose their entire defensive staff basically. And they've got a bunch of good defenders in the transfer portal, yet they're still favored over BC. I didn't think the drop off from Castellanos to Grayson James was actually all that big. So if Nebraska cares about this, I understand why they're favored. But BC first, Nebraska, its first bowl in forever. Yet you got a lot of guys at Nebraska in the portal. BC Northern game, Yankee Stadium. I imagine some of their fans might show up. Well, the Nebraska fans are going to go like crazy to the game as the counter because they haven't gone to a bowl game in like a decade.
They're going to be in New York City. I mean, they're going to be crazy. Times Square is going to be lit up with Nebraska
and red. That one's interesting. I actually could see I could see Boston College there. Like they're not playing all that poorly. They can block a little bit. James played okay for them down the stretch.
Are we to believe that Arizona State is good? I mean, given like priors going into the season, picked to be last. And then, I liked Iowa State in that game, and they, in the first couple of minutes, I felt like a genius, and then after that, I felt like an idiot. So, what am I to believe about them?
I think Brian Ward's a really good defensive coordinator. He seems to get the most out of his guys consistently. I liked what he did last year when they had a bunch of guys hurt. They were still able to keep them in games more often than I thought they should be kept in games. But also, it's very clear that this team arrived a year early, and sometimes that happens. I know from a team that I was covering on a daily basis back then, like Florida State thought the 2014 team would be the team, and it just turned out 2013 showed up and went undefeated. Like they just had guys arrive a year early. There is some of that going on here, but like they thought that 25 would be the year, not 24. And in the back of my mind, like, okay, they're good now. They do a really good job of getting the ball to their best players consistently and finding creative ways. Like they scheme up touches for Scatabo really well, other than just handing them the football. But I mean, have they faced really elite bodies yet? That would be my concern. Like Iowa State doesn't have that. Nobody in the Big 12 really recruits at that crazy level. They didn't get Utah with like, healthy rising, and Utah was pretty banged. So they didn't face Colorado, right? So I'm kind of like, how do they? Is there a boiling point almost? Like is there a certain type of thing where once they get there, oh shoot, these bodies are too big, too fast for us to handle?
All right, last question: does Boise have any chance to win a game, or actually, does that Boise have any chance to win a game?
I think they could because Ginty's really good, but at the same time, like, and that defense, they smoked UNLV's offensive line twice. I do think Boise's defensive line is pretty good. If they get a team that doesn't throw it all that well, a team that tries to pound them, there's certainly a chance they could play kind of a low scoring, run heavy game where Ginty just factors more, which is possible.
All right, Bud, thank you for joining us for our annual bowl / opt out episode. Appreciate it, and have a great bowl season, great holiday.
All right, man, enjoyed it.